Mhm. Let's begin this session the way that we always do, in the recognition of what is, in the clear, full, complete, and absolute recognition that only truth is true. It's not a debate. That which is constant, timeless, changeless, here right now, as I am. Omnipresence being all that there is, necessarily, inevitably, includes what I am. So let us rest here in this full acknowledgement before we get into our reading. We are reading from chapter 1, to Pray Aright. I know some of you have got your copies already of this. And then we're going to move into the workbook. This is not a book club where we just debate theory, but we embody through complete recognition and acknowledgement of the truth to live and tangibly know that the truth is indeed true. So the workbook that accompanies this book is more important, of most important, shall we say. So chapter 1, the questions that demand answers. The problem with prayer as we know it. If God is everything, the sole presence and the only power, then who exactly is doing the praying? If God is all, then who makes a request? To whom is that request directed? Does omnipresence petition omnipotence? Does infinite intelligence ask anything of infinite action? Does the all address itself as if it were divided? Now, we're not racing through these questions. We're simply looking within where the answer is already established. We are not here to bow down to words, but to make the recognition for ourselves of that which actually is, to live the truth, beyond debate, beyond conjecture. So if you sincerely, and of course we'll get into this in our practical component, sincerely and genuinely look where the truth is to be found, you can't fail to see and know and live the truth. These questions are not rhetorical or even clever. They expose a contradiction at the heart of conventional prayer. Remember that prayer is not a thing that we do. We're speaking to the living prayer, or the living meditation as we sometimes refer to it. This contradiction is so fundamental that, once seen, it makes the failure of ordinary prayer understandable, even inevitable. The contradiction is this. If we genuinely believe that God is omnipresent, present everywhere, fully without exception, we cannot also believe God is absent and must be summoned. I'm not inviting you to analyze that information. You are omniscience. The faculties of wisdom make mere thinking look comical. Turn within. The definitive answer and the answer to everything exists right here, where I am, as I am. No one has a copyright on this. No one has more, no one has less, no one's ordained to know this in some kind of special way. It's what you are, equally, everyone, equally. Look where the truth is to be found. Questioning what you think you see, of course. If we believe God is omniscient, completely aware, infinite intelligence, infallible intelligence, we cannot believe God needs to be informed of our needs. If we believe God is omnipotent, the only power, we cannot believe that another power causes our suffering and must be overcome by God. Can we? You know this, I know this. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. Just where to look for what you're actually seeking. This is not a new observation. We're not recreating any wheels here. There aren't any. Mystics and contemplatives of every tradition have noted it. Meister Eckhart, a 14th century Christian mystic, wrote that God is not somewhere to be sought, but God is everywhere. The seeker who looks for God as though God were in a specific place or accessed through a formula has misunderstood the nature of what they seek. The Sufi poet Rumi made the same point. The lover who searches for the beloved does not know the beloved is the very awareness doing the searching. Vedantic teacher Ramana Maharshi pointed seekers not outward to a God to be found, but inward to the self that is already present. We don't have to forge a new way. The way is illumined. It's well lit. It's been walked. We simply need to do the same. This is the demonstration of Christ Jesus also. He wasn't here telling us he was special, and that specialness left with him. He left so that we would see what he was pointing to. These teachers, separated by centuries, continents, and traditions, all shared the same recognition. The God you seek, what you seek, is not elsewhere. I make that distinction of God as what you seek because this isn't a religious search. This is the definitive and final and complete recognition of what is the very principle of life, the mechanics of how life works. This is the operating manual for living. The answered prayer is not one that bridges a gap to a distant deity. The transformation you seek doesn't require the arrival of something absent. It requires recognizing what has never been absent and the willingness to stop pretending otherwise. This is the transformation that we speak to every single day in these sessions, in your private sessions, in our own true contemplation, in the full acknowledgement of what truth is. I've never lacked anything. These contradictions are not minor theological quibbles. They have real, measurable consequences in the lives of people. People who pray. And when I say the word people, I'm speaking of true man, our true identity, the only identity that there is. The significance of this conversation cannot be underestimated. How you live determines what you experience. And if you are off in your understanding of what you are and how life works, can you possibly have an outcome that is right? Just like a mistake in a maths equation, it can't be right. We're learning how to live aright. When you approach prayer, carrying an unexamined contradiction, saying you believe in an omnipresent God while secretly fearing he is absent from your situation, the prayer itself is divided. Part of you reaches toward the recognition of God's completeness, and part of you holds back, waiting for evidence before fully committing. And that division is precisely what prevents the full experience of what prayer, rightly understood, can produce. Let's put this another way. Prevents the full experience of living aright, of knowing that heaven is here and now and practical and tangible. You rip yourself off if we put it in very modern, easy to understand terms. When we don't know how to live aright, we can't. Here's how we do. The person who prays from genuine, undivided recognition, who has resolved the contradiction not by arguing it away, but by seeing clearly what is actually true, prays with a quality of attention that is entirely different from the person who prays from hope mixed with doubt. Hope mixed with doubt. That's the serving two masters. That's not absolute. That's not certainty. And therefore there is no relaxation there. The first is not praying harder. They are praying from a different premise entirely. And the results reflect that difference. Significant because our very experience of life hangs in the balance. You cannot hold both positions at once. Either God is truly omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, or God, in other words, life, in other words, existence, in other words, consciousness, awareness, is a powerful being who's sometimes present, sometimes not, sometimes aware and sometimes not, sometimes willing to act and sometimes not. Does that ring true? Our work here is for you to make that revelation for yourself. Prove it to yourself. You're not picking up words here. Don't believe anyone else. Verify this in your own experience so that you can live as the light in full dominion. These are two completely different conceptions of God, and the form of prayer that is appropriate to one is entirely inappropriate to the other. Most, if asked directly, would say they believe in the first God, the omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent one. But most, when they actually pray, are praying to the second, the powerful being who may or not be paying attention, who may or may not choose to intervene, and who must be approached in the right way, in just the right way, to maximize the chances of a favorable response. This gap between what we say we believe and how we actually pray is the source of the confusion. And it is a gap that no amount of more sincere, more frequent, or more correctly worded praying can bridge. A more precise formula, more banging my head on the brick wall trying to do the same thing and get a different result, because the problem is not in the prayer. It is in the premise. These are not abstract philosophical puzzles. They are the most practical questions we can ask. That's why we're asking them. We're not interested in theory, but the practical revelation that anyone can make. Because it's not special. It's what I am. You can't fail to know what you are because it's what you are. It's already established now. It's not a becoming. It's not a work in progress. Because until they are answered clearly and honestly, every attempt at prayer is built on a foundation of sand, the changing sands of time, as we know. Millions are asking versions of these questions right now. They want to know, does prayer actually work? Should I ask God for things or simply acknowledge what is already true? Does God hear me? What assurance, if any, do I have of an answer? Is there a right way to pray? A specific posture? A specific formula? Can I pray for health, for wealth, for pleasure, for abundance? Or is that somehow spiritually improper? What is the proper attitude when approaching God? How long should I keep asking? Why would God answer me at all? Or some variation of that. Perhaps you've even put your hand up for all of them. That's okay. These are not the questions of the spiritually immature. They are the questions of honest, searching minds, and they deserve honest, precise answers, not platitudes, not evasions, not the kind of comfortable non answer that sends people away still confused, still suffering, still hoping that perhaps they simply haven't prayed hard enough or humbly enough or long enough. What's wrong with me? Where did I go wrong? What don't I know that I should know? Who has the answer? And invariably we end up looking for it in man whose breath is in his nostrils. Weren't we told to run like the clappers away from man whose breath is in his nostrils? Because I am the answer. I, not I, person. When I say I, what I'm referring to has been the Holy Grail. I is not contained in a meat suit. I is not personal. I is infinity, the infinite self. The world's hospitals, its institutions of mental health, its cemeteries all continue to overflow. Something's not working. And the reason it's not working is not a lack of sincerity. It is a misunderstanding of what prayer fundamentally is. Don't we all genuinely, sincerely want to be happy and peaceful? Could it be that the premise of how we go about that could be flawed, mistaken? Of course it is. Because the peace that passeth understanding is right here, right now. And there's so many of you experiencing this. Let's not stop there. Let's keep bounding, striding into the higher mysteries. Here is the core contradiction. You claim to believe in an omnipresent God, fully aware of every need before you speak it, yet you pray as though God is absent and must be informed. You claim to believe in an all-powerful God who lacks nothing, yet you petition as though God might refuse you. You claim to believe God is already complete and perfect, yet you beg as though something is missing from the divine nature, from reality. I know you can already see the contradiction clearly yourself. The gap between what you say you believe about God and how you actually pray is not a small inconsistency. It is the entire reason prayer fails, life seems unmanageable, insurmountable, and unfulfilling. We aren't talking about religious kind of praying, are we here? We're talking about the actual way of living aright, of living fulfilled, of living in a satisfaction that doesn't have any lack, wanting, or limitation. That's normal. That's why Christ Jesus said about the greater works, you can do this and so much more, but you've got to start. We can't get into the so much more until you're living the greater works, which is just normal and natural when we live aright, pray aright, living meditation, living prayer. So until the gap closes, until your prayer reflects what you actually believe about God's nature, you will continue to pray in silence and experience will remain lacking. And that's not your fault. You haven't failed. We simply lack the way in clear terms. This isn't taught in school. You didn't have anyone demonstrating living aright as you were growing up. Your family weren't making these lessons and insights clear. It's not what we learn when we take our first step into school. And yet, is there anything more important than learning how to live aright? No, there really isn't. The choice is absolute. Either God is omnipresent and your prayer is recognition of what is already true, and therefore we live as the light, we live tangibly knowing heaven, or God is distant and your prayer is petition to a being who might or might not respond, and you feel icky, lacking, limited. You cannot genuinely hold both positions. This is where we were told you've got to choose the master you serve and do it. Choose ye this day which master will you serve. This is the choice you make. No one's holding the keys to the kingdom away from you, but no one's going to give them to you because you wield all the power right here, right now. If you want heaven, it's yours to claim because it's already true. So the final part of this chapter is really just reminding you to not move on without answering these questions. The power of your prayer and experience, your potential in life depends entirely on which one you actually believe. Don't rush them. I really want to just take a moment there before we pause and reflect and then get into our workbook. Don't skip over the questions. Don't rush. What you seek is what you are. You aren't seeking, in fact, you're found in knowing that I is the infinite self. That's what I always is. It was never bound up in a body. It never came in with a birth. It doesn't go out with death. It really has nothing to do with any of the circumstances in life. We need to have our perspective resolved, be transformed in the renewing of the recognition of what you are. So there's some questions at the end of this chapter, apart from the ones that you've heard already. Make sure you're taking the time. You are worthy of what this is inviting you to do, to make the self-same discovery that all of the way showers, those who know bliss as a permanent fact, inherent in life itself, did this. You are the answer.